Castlevania may just be my favorite video game on the Nintendo Entertainment System, although that's kinda hard to say what with there being absolute gems like Mario Bros. 3 and Donkey Kong Jr. Math. But what's not hard to say is that Castlevania is a fun and unique 2D platformer. Here's why. There are a lot of reviews of Castlevania on YouTube, so I'm going to try my best not to be too repetitive. Most of the ones that I have seen have mentioned how slowly Simon Belmont moves. Some would argue it's a good thing because it forces the player to be intentional with everything that they do, while others hate on Simon for taking 10 minutes to walk up a flight of stairs. Have a little bit of patience. I personally agree with the former opinion over the latter, but there are other aspects of this game that tend to get overlooked. Something I appreciate about Castlevania is the pacing of the difficulty. The very first level is pretty simple and easy. There's almost no way you can lose. The second level steps it up a notch, but it's still very doable. The third stage is the point when you'll probably start dying more frequently. In particular, I found these ravens to be a nuisance, because they can dive at you from any direction. The second they come into contact with Simon, they burst into flames. I was pretty good at killing these guys. The fourth level is short, but you'll more than likely see the game over screen a few times because of the skeleton dragons followed by the tough boss. The final two stages are insanely difficult. All of a sudden, the skeletons are on crack, and Dracula has invited every monster he knows to hang out at his castle, and maybe kill any humans they see. You know what? Just scratch that last sentence, or at least the first 3 words of it. I shouldn't have said all of a sudden because that would discredit every single point that I just made. You aren't suddenly dropped into an impossibly challenging level. The game progressively gets harder as you get further into Dracula's castle. Another thing that I appreciate about Castlevania is its soundtrack. Almost every song is catchy enough to sing along to. Granted, you're not going to be doing much singing because there aren't any lyrics, but that doesn't stop the songs from getting stuck in your head. In particular, Stage 3's theme, known as Wicked Child, stands out to me as the best song in the game. A lot of the songs in Castlevania are somewhat atmospheric, which makes sense. You wouldn't want a cheery chiptune playing while you're getting slaughtered by an axe, or occasionally doing the same to your enemies. The only issue I have with the theming in Castlevania is that it doesn't stay consistently good. The first 2 levels pick a color scheme, and that's basically what makes them stand out from the rest of the crowd. The very first stage has a small basement section with some water, but it doesn't feel too out of place. The next part of the game is located outside. It's a nice area for Dracula to get some fresh air, maybe soak in some sunlight. By the way, this is making fun of Twilight, not supporting it. I watched about 2 minutes of that movie, and it was enough for me to wish that I were a vampire out in the sun. And just to avoid people getting too mad at me for being factually incorrect about whether or not vampires die in sunlight, I decided to look it up, and it would seem that the idea of vampires burning in the sun is in fact a classic myth. You know, because vampires themselves aren't. Anyways, back to the review. After completing the outdoor portion of the game, Simon falls into a pit. This happens off screen at some point. He never would have fallen off if I had been controlling him. Okay, maybe he would have. The fourth level's theming is fantastic. The music is ominous and the setting is dark. It feels like you're exploring Dracula's flooded basement, and it's over. You spend a little less than a minute in this setting, and then you're back outside. Not to mention that the song Stalker is reused for this segment. Everything that made this level distinct is gone. The clock tower is the other part of Castlevania where the atmosphere was cool for a few seconds, and then dies because of something stupid. This is the final stretch of the game before Simon's confrontation with his nemesis. You enter a monstrous looking head and find yourself in a part of the castle where the bricks are a sickly yellow color. Then, you reach the clock tower. It could use a few more objects in the background. I can almost tell what's supposed to be happening right now. Let's talk bosses. For most of them, I either spam the whip or spam the holy water. They're cool in concept, but some of them are kinda hard to dodge, in particular Death. The interesting thing about the 5th stage is that you get the water at the very beginning, which means that you have to go through the entire thing without dying if you want to fight Death with it. And this is the place where skeletons are used as decorations, so you know that there are lots of deadly enemies roaming the halls. The corridor that leads to Death could also be considered a boss in itself because of the Medusa heads. The entire clock tower feels like one big boss fight to me. For starters, there are large bats outside of it, which is the final obstacle in the first level. Then there's all the ridiculous hunchbacks that get dropped onto the screen relentlessly. You also have Dracula, who I think could maybe be considered a boss. I've done a fair amount of complaining in this video, but I think that the biggest flaws of Castlevania could be considered good things. I already covered the debate about Simon moving like a sloth. I could see people getting angry over how short the game is, but I would say that it works out in its favor. There's no saving or passwords, plus Castlevania is pretty tough, so you're going to end up spending a good amount of time just trying to beat the game no matter how much content there is. And then there's the topic of the game crashing. I experienced this once, and actually nothing good comes out of it. Konami should really put out a patch for this game. It's a broken piece of garbage at this point. Don't even know how they could let this slide. Jokes aside, Castlevania really is one of my favorite games on the NES. Castlevania is just difficult enough to be satisfying to beat, yet also fair enough to not have you spiking your controller. The music and atmosphere are good most of the time, and it's still fun on a second replay. If you haven't tried out this classic yet, then it might be worth giving a shot. Thanks for watching the video. Hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, then maybe hitting the like and subscribe button wouldn't be a bad idea. I'll let you decide that. That's about all I have to say. Goodbye.